At the beginning of the movie, we meet a U.S. soldier named John Falcon, who is struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by memories of violence and the deaths of his fellow soldiers during his military service. The trauma of seeing his friends die left a lasting impact on him. The next day, while shopping, 2 armed goons burst into the store, trying to intimidate everyone. However, John remained unfazed. He grabbed one of the goons' guns, placed it against his own head, and calmly instructed him to aim for the head to ensure an instant death. Angered by John's defiance, the goon tried to react, but John swiftly disarmed and attacked him, killing the goon. John then starts dealing with the second goon and kills him also. Later, when he's back home sleeping, his sister Cindy visits him. She mentions she's attending a friend's wedding and plans to return to Brazil soon to continue her social service work. A few days later, we see Cindy lying injured and unconscious on a beach in Brazil. When John hears about her condition, he immediately travels to Brazil to be by her side. Meanwhile, in Brazil, a policeman named Santo, along with his partner Baroro, conducts a brutal raid in a neighborhood called Favela, killing several people and arresting others for possessing illegal weapons. A police officer named Catarina arrives and orders Santo to stop the arrests, reminding him that she's responsible for this area. However, Santo dismisses her and tells her to stay out of his way. Then the boy from the crowd throws a stone at Santo, enraging him. In a fit of rage, Santo pulls out his sword and threatens the boy. Seeing this, the other boys in the area pull out their guns and aim at Santo, forcing him to back down and raise his hands. Santo, however, issues a challenge. If any of them is brave enough to fight his man and they win, he promises never to return to the favela. The boys, who are actually gang members, accept the challenge. Santo then tells his friend Baroro to fight. The boy who threw the stone steps up to face Baroro, but Baroro, skilled in martial arts, easily overpowers him and wins. As Santo leaves, he threatens the boys, vowing to return soon. Meanwhile, John has arrived in Brazil, where a police officer named Ridley comes to pick him up. John heads straight to the hospital to see his sister Cindy, who is in critical condition. As he looks at her injuries, traumatic memories flash through his mind. Santo then shows up, investigating Cindy's case, and Officer Ridley introduces John to him, assuring him that Santo will handle it. However, John wants to investigate himself and asks Santo to take him to the spot where Cindy was found injured. Santo takes John to the location where Cindy was found. Upon arriving, John meets Catarina. Suddenly, John grabs Katrina's gun and fires at a nearby car. He had detected the sound of a bomb inside, and his quick action neutralized the threat before it could explode. Witnessing this, Santo realizes that John is not an ordinary man and instructs Catarina to keep a close eye on him. Katrina then takes John around the favela, showing him the schools and hospitals, explaining that they are funded with illegal money. As John continues wandering, he ends up back at the beach where Cindy had been lying injured. There, he notices a group of boys and starts following them. John spots one of them, named Kuka, wearing the same amulet that Cindy had around her neck. When John asks about the amulet, Kuka doesn't understand his language, leaving him to grab his neck. Suddenly, other boys try to attack him, but John quickly overpowers the boys, and he pulls out a knife and tries to attack him. Catarina arrives, aiming her gun at them and demanding that John drop the knife. John complies and then questions Catarina about the amulet around Kuka's neck. Catarina explains that when she asked Kuka about amulet, he mentions Sister Maria. He tells that Maria was his sister's friend and that Cindy had given the amulet to his sister, who is now missing. This suggests that someone planned to harm Cindy and might have kidnapped Kuka's sister. Kuka then hands a diary to John. Using the carbon copies in the diary, John discovers a contact number for a photographer. He tracks down the photographer and asks him about Cindy. The photographer reveals that Cindy was investigating a human trafficking group. John asks the photographer for any photos related to the attack on Cindy, but he refuses to share them. As he leaves, John hugs him and secretly slips a pen drive from her pocket. Moments later, the photographer gets into her car, which suddenly explodes, scattering debris everywhere. Almost immediately, a group of goons arrives and opens fire on John. He narrowly escapes, grabs a gun from one of the attackers, and fires back, forcing them to run the scene. John then takes the pen drive to Ridley and examines the photos stored on it. In one of the images, he spots a man standing next to his sister, with a car parked nearby. Upon closer inspection through the car's window in the photo, there is something written on it. Ridley realizes that this is a nightclub, Kronos. He suggests that this man might be found at this bar. That night, John visits the bar and finds the man, who is working as DJ there, Lima. John begins tailing Lima and follows him into a bathroom. Before John can approach Lima, one of his bodyguards tries to block his path. John knocks the bodyguard out with a powerful punch, leaving him unconscious on the spot. He then confronts Lima in the bathroom, roughing him up and showing him a photo of Cindy, demanding answers. Lima initially refuses to talk, so John slams him into the sink and applies more pressure. Lima eventually breaks, revealing that someone had misled Cindy by providing false information about him. He explains that he never knew Cindy personally, but when she came to find him, a group of unknown assailants spotted her and brutally attacked her. John presses further, demanding to know who these attackers were, and Lima finally gives him their address. We then see Santo preparing his team for a raid. They've received intel about a group involved in drugs and prostitution and are getting ready to strike. Meanwhile, John arrives at Ridley's location, and they set off for the address Lima provided. Simultaneously, Santo and his team are on their way to the same location for their raid. John, however, arrives first at a nearby restaurant, where a girl greets him and leads him inside. He calmly takes a seat. A man in the restaurant then calls a girl named Tomo. The moment Tomo spots John, she discreetly orders her men to stand down. Speaking on the phone, she mentions their leader, Hiramoto, expressing worry about how furious Hiramoto will be when he learns John has found their base. She instructs her men to deal with John swiftly and quietly, hoping to avoid any chaos. A man approaches John and pulls him aside. As John turns, he spots a car from which several girls are stepping out, including Kuka's sister, Maria. Suddenly, the man attacks John from behind, attempting to strangle him. John fights back, using the bag he's holding to strike his attacker, quickly subduing him. He then makes his way to a nearby house, where he discovers a group of teenage girls being held captive. Realizing that this is part of a human trafficking operation, John understands the scale of the crime ring he's dealing with. Meanwhile, Santo and his team launch their raid on the drug dealers. In the chaos, some dealers are killed, while others attempt to flee. One of the officers chases one of the escaping dealers and follows him some distance, only to come across two men forcing girls into a car. He swiftly shoots one of the kidnappers dead and takes down the other, saving the girls from being abducted. Officer points his gun and calls out to his team about the situation, and then Santo arrives and picks up the gun of the dead man, aims it at his own officer, and shoots him. This reveals that Santo is actually working for Hiramoto. Santo then approaches a Russian man involved in the operation, demanding double payment for his services. He calls Tomo and insists on getting the money, and she directs him to a location. Tomo then informs Hiramoto that Santo is requesting payment, and Hiramoto instructs her to give him the money. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, John is fighting fiercely, taking down enemies one by one with lethal precision. Meanwhile, Hiramoto's men capture Lima and bring him there. Without hesitation, Hiramoto kills Lima. At the same time, John finishes off the last of his enemies when Katerina arrives with Santo. Santo points his gun at John, announcing that he's under arrest. John tries to reason with him, revealing that Hiramoto is behind the kidnappings and human trafficking. Determined to prove it, John leads Santo to the place where the girls were held. But when they open the door, the room is empty. John then shows some documents that reveal how the traffickers smuggle the girls out of the country. Santo quickly takes the papers, promising to investigate. He then asks John for Lima's bag and instructs Katerina to escort John out. As John reaches the car, he suddenly realizes something. He never mentioned Lima or his bag to Santo. He instructs Katerina to stay with Cindy while he goes to Santo. Katrina arrives at the hospital, where she finds Tomo attempting to kill Cindy. Without hesitation, Katrina shoots Tomo, stopping her just in time. Meanwhile, Santo heads to a port, unaware that John has hidden in the trunk of his car. John emerges and discovers that the traffickers are preparing to send all the girls to Japan. He quickly calls Ridley, explains the situation, and asks for backup. Realizing that waiting for help could take too long, John decides to take matters into his own hands. He starts taking down the guards and traffickers one by one. Hiramoto soon realizes that John is at the port and alerts Santo, but John is unstoppable. He eliminates the goons methodically, and eventually, Hiramoto, Carlo, and Santo confront him. The intense battle begins, and John fights fiercely. He manages to rip the chain from Santo's neck and uses it as a weapon, driving it into Santo's chest, leaving him half dead. Then, John turns his attention to Carlo, defeating and killing him as well. Hiramoto launches a sword attack on John, who grabs two metal rods to defend himself. However, Hiramoto reveals a hidden knife within his sword, managing to wound John. Hiramoto then tells John that his sister was a skilled fighter too, but that John is even better. Furious, John channels his rage and uses one of the rods to relentlessly beat Hiramoto until he dies. John then approaches Santo, who hands him a key and confesses that poverty forced him into a life of crime. Santo begs John to end his misery, but instead, John chooses to spare him. As John walks away, a gunshot rings out. Santo has taken his own life. The police arrive soon after, rescuing all the girls, including Maria, Cuca's sister. John heads to the hospital to see his sister Cindy. The doctor informs him that her recovery will be long and costly. Ridley then approaches John with a proposal, a new mission in exchange for funding Cindy's medical care. John agrees. In this way, movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.